Further, in part two, how did the federal government attempt to eliminate Native American threats to Western settlers? One was by promoting that aggressive attacking of the Native American food supply in the buffalo, but also very early on, during this expansion, Native peoples were forced to agree to treaties, which moved them onto reservations. And then they were moved on to even smaller reservations, where they were often taken advantage of by corrupt government officials. Money that was supposed to go to the Native Americans to help them move on to the territories or to get set up often ended up in government official pockets. This is also the time where you start hearing about blankets with smallpox on them that were used to kill off Native Americans. There was Native American resistance. We have to be careful and remember that Native Americans did not just passively accept their movement to the reservations, but resistors were relentlessly hunted down by the U.S. cavalry in a series of what are known as Indian Wars. You can see here that a Native American camp is being attacked by soldiers here in the background and coming in from the side. The government also often broke treaties. Reservations tended to be the least desirable farmland. However, once the Native Americans were settled, if precious minerals were found, often the government would just push natives off the reservation. This was especially the case in places like Nevada, where silver was found after the reservations had been established. The criticism of government policy, because even the white settlement didn't necessarily agree with how Native Americans were being treated. There was an attempt to assimilate Native Americans into white culture. Tribal lands were divided into pieces. They were given out to individual families. There's a catch, though, because the individual family had to farm that land for about 25 years, and only then could they keep it. So they had to learn how to act like white farmers in order to keep that land. It's a scheme, by the way. It's a trick. Because, first of all, the scheme didn't match the traditional land use. Most tribes believed in tribal ownership of the land, not individual ownership. So not everyone who received land knew necessarily how to farm it. And if they didn't know how to farm it, they lost the land, which was then sold to white settlers. And even if you take all of that land that was given out and put it all together, each head of household only received 160 acres. So if you took all that land and it only accounted for a fraction of what the large reservation was made up of, and you know what happened to whatever land was left over, it's going to be sold to those white settlers. There's one more other piece to this, and that is that assimilation was a big goal. In fact, the term that they used was kill the Indian, save the man. So the government decided to get Native Americans while they were young and indoctrinate them into white culture. Native American children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools in the East where they were taught to speak English. They were taught how to dress and act like white Americans. Literally, it was an effort to eliminate their cultural heritage. If you get them young, they don't understand their cultural heritage. So we start to see pictures like this. Native Americans learning how to cook white meals. Native Americans learning how to act like white housewives. And Native Americans learning how to live in a white-style dormitory. There was resistance to this. The Indian Wars were basically over, but there was an effort after this to retain their cultural heritage, which didn't end so well. Remember, the Native Americans are still fresh in the white military's mind, so as Native Americans tried to get back together and revive old traditions like the ghost dance, the U.S. military perceived this as a threat, and in one famous example, the massacre at Wounded Knee, the Native Americans attempted to perform a religious ritual known as the ghost dance, but the U.S. military, fearing that this was actually a trick, ended up attacking and massacring a few hundred of the Native Americans at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. The result of the policy was that Native Americans were left in poverty and in a state of cultural decline. And like other minorities, they were left having no voice in any American democracy.